Hello, everyone. My name is Curtis Caesar John, and I want to thank and welcome everyone for joining us for Digging for Weldon Irvine for the Q&A for Digging for Weldon Irvine presented by Black Docs. As I said, my name is Curtis John. I'm the founder of the Luminal Theater. And the Luminal is one of the co-founders of Black Docs alongside Speller Street Films. Now, we started Black Docs in 2020 to help build an authentic documentary film culture within the African American community through film screenings, webinars, and um, interactive showcases and film events and such. One of the first films we even ever considered showing, we even thought about showing, was Digging for Weldon Irvine. And so we are extremely ecstatic to finally present it to you and to chat with Victorious De Costa, director of the fantastic music and historical documentary, alongside his executive producer, G-Clef. And this is extra special tonight as we have a special guest to moderate our discussion, Shannon Ali. Shannon is a freelance arts journalist and cultural critic for over a decade. Her writing on all things jazz and music regularly appears in the New York Times, the Washington Post, NPR Music, Pitchfork, Bandcamp, Ebony, Jazzes, Jazzwise, and Downbeat, among others. And wow, that's already a long list. So I can imagine how long the among others are. So Shannon, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to bring her along in a minute, and she's going to moderate this fantastic discussion tonight. I just want to read the bios for our esteemed guests before we do so. A first-generation New Yorker born of South/Central American parentage, Victorious De Costa has dedicated his life to providing social service, locally and abroad. Victorious's lifelong love for the arts and activism has taken him around the world, where he has learned the art of storytelling from different cultures, as well as techniques to reach people in need. Victorious is a producer of Yusuf Hawkins' Storm Over Brooklyn, a documentary released by HBO Films via ABFF/Lightbox, and Digging for Weldon Irvine is his directorial debut. G-Clef started his professional jazz career at the age of 17, when he was discovered by jazz great Lionel Hampton. From there, he began performing regularly with legendary trumpeter Doc Cheatham, with whom he recorded a live album, Echoes of Harlem, at 18 years old. Wow. With the legendary jazz master Illinois Jacquet, G-Clef performed in the lead alto saxophone chair and was also featured on the Grammy-nominated Jacquet's Got It. He is the co-founder of the Yallopin Hounds and a pioneer of modern swing. His music has been featured in television and movies, including Showtime's Weeds and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. As a jazz soloist, he has 5 albums released to date, as well as creating a new jazz imprint labeled Soul Kid Jazz. And G-Clef is one of the executive producers of Digging for Weldon Irvine. So let me bring them all in. I'm going to get going and see you all at the end. Thank you, Shannon. I appreciate you doing this for us tonight.
No, it's an honor, and for so many reasons. I feel like sampling is a big reason why I'm sitting here today, why it has informed my life and my career. And I thought it would be a nice tribute to Mr. Irvine and to all the great musicians that have been sampled, if we could all go around and talk about a particular sample or song that was memorable for you, for whatever reason, whether it was the first sample that you discovered or just what song or what hook was pivotal for you. Anyone first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Before I knew Weldon Irvine, before he became one of my best friends in the whole world, I was a jazz musician, as you said in the bio, and I was kind of a jazz purist. And then I started getting into hip hop because I was music of my peers, my age group. Because I was kind of a young jazz prodigy and all of that, like he said. But then in like around 1986, I'm hearing hip hop. I'm living in Jersey City, New Jersey, going to school at the new school in the village. And I'm hearing hip hop, and I'm really starting to hear, wait a minute, there's something to this. It sounds like jazz a little bit. So I'm starting to make the connection. Now, at the same time, I'm not really latching on to anything. But ironically, the first song that I really memorized in my head, where I said, "This is my song. I said, this is my anthem," was "My Philosophy" by KRS-One.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, this guy is great. Not only does he remind me of my man Herman, who plays tenor sax, because we're all the same age, and KRS-One is born the same year as me. I'm like, but he's also saying things that I appreciate. I like this guy. KRS-One. What is this? Hip hop music. All right. And then I found out, oh, wait, the music comes from Stanley Turrentine. It's just to sanctify, because I have the ultimate beats and breaks. Because I started producing, I started getting into it. Yeah. I'm like, it says written by Weldon Irvine. I'm like, Weldon Irvine? Isn't that the guy from Jamaica, Queens? Who everybody's like the guru? He's like the Barry Harris of Jamaica, Queens. All the musicians go to him and all of that. I'm like, what is this connection? And that's how it started for me. I didn't know it at the time that I was going to meet this dude, but I mean, that's years, like at least 4 years before. This had to be 88 that came out. At least 4 years before I met Weldon. I already was like drawn in that direction. But that I know everybody loves My Philosophy by KRS-One. My Philosophy by KRS-One. Sorry, and everybody. I think that was a groundbreaking thing for everybody. You know, in music and in America.
Victorious. Oh, I think you're on mute. Victorious, you're on mute. Oh.
He might be muted by the host.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, I'll chime in. I think as oh, go ahead. There you go. Yay.
I did it somehow.
So that's why you have to have your StreamYard on full screen, or else you won't see the microphone. All right. So not to I'm sorry to interject, Shannon.
No worries.
Yeah. So my moment came a little bit later. I think it was 94, and I went to my mother's friend Craig's house. Craig had records. Craig was a lot, well, honestly, a lot older. I'll be disrespectful, but he was a little bit older, my mother's age, and he had a Minnie Riperton record. And I was just like passing time, you know, in his living room as they were just talking about adult things in the kitchen. And that's when I heard Inside My Love. And at the end of that, when she's just like whistling, I heard, oh, that's Tribe Called Quest Lyrics to Go, which, you know, I didn't know that was a human voice.
Yeah.
And I don't think I was too in tune with sampling either. Like I think I knew about what sampling was, but I didn't really get it. And that just really just set me into record collecting and sampling myself. So it's Minnie and Tribe.
It's funny. So there's a synergy here because that was my pick.
Really? Same song. Nice.
I was blown away by, you know, just Minnie Riperton was a life force to begin with, but the way that he was able to elongate that note that didn't seem like a human voice could make that even possible is just beyond. And then the Tribe documentary showing how that happened was pretty good. But I guess I'll pick, in the spirit of this, I'll pick another influential, another Tribe, Bonita Applebaum, Ramp, or Roy Ayers, the sample from Daylight for Bonita Applebaum was like probably my first, because it was just, you know, I think my point of discovery later on and wanting to get to the source of things, as writer Oliver Wang mentioned about, you know, wanting the sample was like the getting to the bottom of it, like, you know, wanting to know and where from which it originated, you know, and I think that's what Bonita Applebum was, and it just started this whole sort of life of wanting to unpack all of the songs that I had grown up listening to in terms of hip hop and getting to the source of each, you know, you're almost like, it's like an excavation process. So yeah, I think that was definitely the first, but Lyrics to Go is definitely one of my favorites because of Many Were Pretend for sure.
And you mentioned Oliver Wang. I just want to say that I sat down with Oliver in California for the film. The interview didn't make the final cut, but it was great. He was great. He was supported from day one. And yeah, so there's going to be a lot of those in sync moments, I guess, on this talk.
Yeah. So now let's jump into the film. I know you both have sort of your respective journeys and ties to Mr. Irvine. We could talk about sort of the impetus behind, you know, ultimately creating the film.
So I would say that I had no tie towards Weldon. I didn't know who Weldon Irvine was. And G-Clef and I were speaking on the phone. I had done about, at that point, maybe 3 or 4 short films. And I think G-Clef told me, if I'm right, you had just finished watching the Jaco Pastorius documentary. And I think you were inspired by that. And so G-Clef told me that I need to do a film about his friend Weldon, who apparently he told me about a few times. And, you know, I will shamefully admit it went, you know, from one ear out the other until I saw Weldon's story. I saw what happened to Weldon. I saw Weldon's influence. And I went back to G-Clef and I said, let's do it. And you're going to be my executive producer. And so that's the story from my end.
Yeah. And G-Clef, you touched on your relationship with Weldon. If you could unpack that a little bit more.
Okay. Sure. I was aware of who Weldon Irvine was. Like I said, he was a legend among New York musicians, but he had a crew that would never really come out of Queens. Strangely, it was almost like a cult. And they were called the Jamaica Crew or the Jamaica Funk Boys or Jamaica Boys. Or that whole kind of Jamaica clique type of thing was developing in music, and it was all a big secret until some of them started getting deals and started blowing up, like Tom Brown, Jamaica Funk. Marcus Miller was producing Luther Vandross. Lenny White was making it in jazz, and all those guys started really making it, and then people started paying attention. Said, "What is this sound from? What's going on out there?" And everybody, musicians would talk, be like, "Oh, that's Weldon Irvine's crew. Oh man, Weldon, yeah, he taught all them guys, man." But so you know, it's a mystery because you really didn't see what was going on because it was so. I was from West Hempstead, and I was traveling in the city by that time. In the city, I was going to school at Rutgers, and then in the new school. So I wasn't in Jamaica at the time. But you would hear about this stuff and be like, Weldon Irvine, and the name sounds so strange, like so elegant and so masterful, a real guru. He got that reputation. So I was always afraid, like Barry Harris in jazz, like you don't want to be tested. You know that day is gonna come. You're gonna get tested. So I was always afraid a little bit, like this guy. But then he comes and tries to meet me. He came looking for me, which was the most humbling experience. I'm like, why are you looking for me, man? He's like, yo, man, I've been tracking you down. I've been wanting to talk to you. I'm like, why? He's like, so I heard you not only are a jazz musician, but you're also got like a hip hop situation. I'm like, yeah, I got a group called Ghetto Philharmonic. We're experimental. We're trying to push this new fusion between jazz and hip hop. He's like, well, man, you might not know this about me, but I am the sole inventor of jazz fusion. What? I was like blown away. I was like, well, I mean, I'm not, you know, I like Weather Report. I was friends with Jocko. He used to follow Jocko around, but I don't have an extensive knowledge of the origins of jazz fusion. I've been mostly playing like straight ahead jazz over here, swing and bebop. And he's like, nah, man, let me explain it to you. And he broke it down for me how he did his own records and put them out with RCA and all this stuff. And I was blown away because I'm also a composer mainly and an arranger and a conceptualist and a producer. I was already on my way doing that in hip hop as a producer. And I'm like, wow, he's like the first hip hop producer in a way.
Yeah.
Because the difference, and this is the thing, I just watched the Quincy Jones documentary for the first time. And I'm watching, it could have been a documentary of Weldon. Because there's a transitional time between jazz and modern music where it changed from being what you call an arranger to a producer.
Right.
And what that means is, yeah, in the big band era, you would write arrangements like Duke or Billy Strayhorn would write these 15-piece arrangements, and a copyist would copy out all the parts. Well, after overdubbing comes in, like in the 1950s, and you can actually overdub parts and layer things, it's not as important to have those arrangements played completely at the same time. Although most of them still did that. Most studios still did that way. Like if you see any old Frank Sinatra sessions in the 50s or anything like that, or you see even later Burt Bacharach sessions, you see all these, you know, tons of musicians in the studio at once. But there's also overdubbing. Like they might lay down a full orchestra and then chill. Say, all right, now let's go back and let's fix this bass part, you know, like things like that. So that's when it became producing to me. And the reason I say it was like hip hop is because Weldon was laying down layers of music conceptually that were like what you refer to as samples.
Right.
What you were just talking about, or all those moves of things, different layers. And as a hip hop producer, of course, I appreciate that. But I'm on both sides. So I was always kind of wondering, when did one become the other? And what is the connection? What is the connection between the two? And he is the connection. He was the living embodiment of the connection. He wasn't a great virtuoso pianist. No. I don't know. Everybody, some people try to say, no, that was not. And he was realistic about it. He was just like, no, man, I mean, like, you know, man, like, I might not be able to play like Herbie Hancock, but, you know, I know how to make funky music. And he would. I mean, you can't deny it. The guy it was great. It was like, how did he come up with these ideas out of nowhere? And then you have to look to his teacher, which Victorious might want to get into that. I won't get into that, but it's almost like another, I hate to say it, but it's almost like another Charlie Parker incident where somebody came out of the blue with ideas that nobody was doing. It's a real, he was a real innovator with a capital I. I said too much. I'll chill.
No, you're opening up a lot of moments in the film that that sort of answered a lot of questions, because it is a you know, there's so many dualities when you say the word sample. A lot of things come up, but one moment that helped to sort of explain what Weldon's, you know, role and place in music is his the way that he equated greatness in musicianship, and that greatness meant versatility. That a musician could play R&B, a musician could play the blues, a musician could play jazz and be able to, you know, or have an understanding of it that would, you know, come out and give him the thing that he needs. So do you think that sort of, I mean, I don't know, we can unpack that a little bit more, but
they say that Ellington's instrument was really the orchestra. Well, Weldon's instrument was the funk. He was taking James Brown grooves and bringing in jazz musicians like Sonny Fortune and these guys, and they were not. It was alien to them. I mean, everybody knew what was going on. I'm pretty sure in 1970 on the radio in black music. I'm sure if you're a black musician, you're aware of what's going on. But how do you fit into that? Other than playing just some horn lines like the JBs, is the mystery at that point. It's not being done. There's no documentation of that being done. But all of a sudden, he's going in the studio with all his ideas, and I mean, this is a long time. I mean, Victorious might know the historical effect of it. But what year was that? That on my spot.
No. What year was what?
1970. Was he already recording that music?
I mean, so he says he was doing it since the 50s. I wasn't there, right? So,
Yeah,
but there is a song he did called Weldon's Riff that I have a copyright for in '61. And Weldon said he called it rock jazz, what they call fusion. He called rock jazz.
He usually calls it jazz rock fusion.
Right. And the thing is with Weldon, before we get into him saying that's what makes a great musician, you have to understand that Weldon was largely self-taught, and so he wasn't really guided into any particular genre of music. So he saw it all as music. And he came to New York in '64, and he had to work, right? He was living with his family, had to work. And so the playing of other styles of music, his thing was, if you want to eat and if you want to survive, you can't just be playing gospel. You got to know how to play the jazz gig. You got to know how to play the rock gig. And so his thing is, if you're coming under his tutelage, you have to play everything, because if Weldon Irvine gets booked a gig for his band, I got to be able to call Lenny White, if it's a rock gig, or I have to call, Lenny White again, if it's a gospel gig. And that was his philosophy, that you would have to be able to play everything if you wanted to eat as a young artist. And that is what made them great, right? But it came from necessity first, and so that right there, right, is the beginning of your fusion, because anyone that came under Weldon Irvine school had to be able to play everything. And when asking Lenny White, hey, what was it like to play with Weldon when we were young, and he said you have to play everything, every show, every gig, you're playing every style of music.
Yeah, and I think that it certainly attributes to a certain innovation and openness, and because there seemed to be a time, and maybe speaking with jazz musicians today, I won't name names. Certain musicians have a certain feeling about sampling and not in a positive light. And
I could speak to that because I was right there. All right, so that's a funny stuff. All right, so the day we met. All right, this is very important. The day we met was at a club called. It was a club in Uniondale called Coda Restaurant, and I was booking the music there. He came by to see me play, and a mutual friend, William Ash, great guitarist, who has been managed by Weldon, brought Weldon to meet me. And I said right away, KRS-One, Sister Sanctified. He says, yeah, man, I'm hearing all about it. I want to sit down with you and make a list, because I want to go to these labels and collect. So, and I know Aaron Fuchs in the documentary Tough City CEO, Aaron Fuchs, alludes to that too. Like, people want to say, there's two sides to Weldon when sampling, okay? On the one hand, he thought it was great. He loved it. He loved that Black youth was picking up on his music some kind of way, where it was living on through their expression. So he loved that. He supported the Black musicians. What he also did is track down the labels for money. I mean, he got 10 grand right after that conversation. I got him 10 grand, like not directly, but just by telling him, oh yes, that's KRS-One. This is the label. Go get him. He got him. And then he went to Jive Records, not only collected on KRS-One, but in the same meeting, collected on Too Short. So that was his first check. I know it was a big check. It was like 20 grand right there.
Yeah, and it was.
And then if you're getting 20 grand for sample, oh man, I love hip hop. Now he's going to Jack the Rapper. Now he's going to the music seminar and all the conventions and College Music Journal, and running around and meeting all the CEOs, meeting all the rappers, and then after that he took off running, and he knew more people than I could introduce him to. He met. I remember he met Pete Rock. He was so excited. He met Rissa. I know you heard that story, Victorious. He met Premier, and, you know, and he just kept talking to all the producers and all the label people and all the MCs. That's why he got to know Q-Tip very well and other people like that. And but there was two sides to it. Definitely, like we have in a documentary him warning T.S. Monk. If you watch the documentary, you see T.S. Monk is like they doing it to our music. They're not doing it to the Beatles. Blah blah blah. Because hey, Weldon was. I'm not gonna say he was getting rich, but he was doing all right with sample lyrics. Yeah, he was definitely a proponent of that, in favor of it, and he would let the other musicians know, hey, you can shake the labels down. He was doing that. He was. I'm not gonna lie. He was. He was. I mean, you can't blame him. Yeah. He was doing, I mean, is it fair? Ultimately, here's me as a musician coming into sampling in 1988, and I hated when the label started shaking down the rap producers because I felt, for some reason, I felt it was okay. But then putting my musician hat back on, I would think, well, if I created some music from stem to stern organically out of the ether and somebody else is going to take it and make a hit record, I feel some kind of way too.
Yeah. And so it's funny.
Both sides.
Yeah, no. And it's something that I struggle with. You know, I'm a product of the hip hop generation, and then I became a jazz critic because of, you know, I think the native tongues was a huge part of my development, and like that was hip hop. I mean, you know, and my love for jazz really began. My formal sort of initial jazz education came from that.
That's Weldon right there. That's crazy.
That's where it's always. Then you know, imagine like. I want to talk about the jazz musicians that I spoke with specifically about, but I can't.
When I had my group Ghetto Philharmonic, me and Weldon both were doing that circuit. So we both got involved with like Giant Step and all that stuff, and the New Rican Poets Cafe and things like that. And let me tell you, I never imagined that it would be leading to jazz fans, people that love jazz coming out of that. So. That's great to hear from you. You know, I mean, I never imagined that.
It saved my life. It literally saved my life.
I'm like, it's really all Weldon, man. It's really
right. I think with native tongues and Q-Tip, what they did was ethical sampling, right? Yeah. And Q-Tip was a big, or is a big, jazz fan himself. And I think that on the end of the original artist, there's this stigma that hip hoppers have, where it's like sampling means I'm not going to get paid, or sampling means stealing, or sampling means no one's going to know that I'm the person that did it. Because
there's like a laziness or something, you know, like a lack of innovation or creativity.
And this is true a lot of times. Yeah. This is even within hip hop, you have whack MCs and whack DJs and whack producers. You know, and the thing with sampling in hip hop, the big thing is to have this obscure record that no one knows what you sampled. Or if you're DJing, you might have covered the labels, no one knows what you're spinning, and you assume all of the props from it, right? Even though this is something that you are taking the light off of the original artist, and then you know you're getting paid from it. So that's not cool, right? So I think that if more people did what Q-Tip did with Weldon, and a lot of other artists did with Weldon, just like sit down, talk with him, and it gets that much better for you,
for sure,
for everyone,
for sure.
But the jazz movement, the movement of I had to interrupt because when you say that you captured you what's the word, you got swept away into a love of jazz from being hip hop generation. What does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think that I got to the point where the music of my generation, the music of my age, didn't speak to me in a profound way. I didn't feel like I can look at it and see myself or hear myself reflected in what was coming out after, you know, Tribe and you know, I mean, I think right at the point of college, and plus where I grew up in Bed-Stuy, I was surrounded by jazz musicians in a time when I couldn't even appreciate that I was surrounded by jazz musicians. Randy Weston lived maybe a few blocks away from where I grew up. Betty Carter was like a half a mile up at BAM, you know, and these were just sort of great facts and then artifacts. But then I think that eventually meant something to me. And then, you know, I was probably 18 or 19 years old when I caught, from the very beginning, my favorite things on Jazz 88, you know, holding the radio so that the static wouldn't come in.
Right,
so I mean, you know, and it was like the closest experience, I always say, to a religious moment. And I just knew that jazz was going to be a part of my life. I didn't know it was going to be my life's work, but I knew.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Now that you see this army, like an army of young jazz musicians who are so well versed in hip hop, like, you know, like Dave Chris, like piano player, you know what I'm talking about. But like these younger musicians who now just come to the gig ready to, they can have Pete Roxton just doing his thing that he used to do, or they can have you know, they can have a jazz musician sit in, you know. It's how do you feel about that as somebody? I think you're the generation after me. You're like a little yeah. So like I'm in between the Weldon people and now, but like, what do you know what I'm talking about, right? You know about that scene out there, how it's taken seriously now. It's just a vibe. It's not like a division. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I don't really know how.
Okay. Well, there's a young, I say from like top age 40 down to 20 of musicians now that are like an army of cats that just, they know all the break beats, but they also know the blues.
Right.
They also know rhythm changes. They also know Cherokee. They also, like, they know they can weave in and out of both. So it's bugged out to me because you got to understand, I'm 53 years old now. Okay. The musicians, when I was in my 20s, this is the era when KRS-One, everybody's Q-Tip, they're all my age. And then I eventually got with Wu-Tang, and the rest is a different part of my history. But in this critical era of 1992 to 95, if I went to a jazz gig and asked the drummer to play a hip-hop beat, they're looking at me.
I see what you're saying.
Are you well?
Yeah.
Are you not well today?
Yeah.
They've a complete animosity.
Right.
So just think of a guy named Weldon who's years older than me coming to musicians with that. Yeah.
Well, then I think my response to that, tied with another project I'm working on, is Mark Carey. It's Roy Hargrove. It's these musicians who are also of the hip hop generation, but
but Roy is kind of the beginning of that. What I'm talking about,
right?
Roy is like the beginning. Like these are Roy's sons now and daughters now,
right?
Rolling around, you know.
But I think what I'm saying is, like, I feel like you know, there are a lot of people from the you know, from that school, from that train of thought that you know, when you understand the correlations and the origins from where the music came, it's all, you know, sort of, I think that the canvas is open, and I feel encouraged by it in a way that that I probably wouldn't have felt, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. Because I feel like
rest assured, the top young jazz, I hate the word jazz, but the top jazz musicians now, there's a good tribe of women and men who can easily weave in and out of hip hop.
Right.
It's like
Right.
really nothing to them. It's the same.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
one big black music and not any kind of prejudice and that's really the world that Duke Ellington predicted. My idol, Duke Ellington, always said there's two kinds of music, good and bad.
Yeah.
And he hated the word jazz and the categories. And well, you're not bebop, you're not this, you're not that. You're fusion. At the end of the day, it's all world music, and we're all playing in the same symphony, you know.
Exactly, and that's that. I concur. I feel the same way. I want us to get to the place where, you know, we don't have labels, sort of.
People like Weldon Irvine.
Yeah.
People like Weldon Irvine just wanted respect for that.
He was a visionary.
He wanted not to be laughed at for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say it like that, but I saw him get laughed at and ridiculed many times.
Wow.
But no, he got a lot of respect. I mean, you got Kenny Dorham and Joe Henderson playing your music. You're getting respect. Yeah. But with respect comes jealousy.
Yeah, and then let's talk about that, because I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about, you know, he's had a very interesting, and I think because you rarely see a musician like that who has, you know, straddled both the jazz and the hip hop side in such a way. I guess because of the time in which it happened. You know, on one hand, you have Nina Simone's musical director, and you have you know the composer for Horace Silver, like, which blew my mind, and like,
there is no such thing as that, right?
Yeah, and then also, you know, having a hand on, you know, Black on Both Sides, which is still like in my top 5. And and someone like Q-Tip, you know, like, you talk about just the straddling. I mean, we've gotten into pretty deep into the sampling, but we would be remiss if we didn't talk about how he was able to sort of navigate those two different roles or world, if you will.
Yeah. And then also rapping at 50 years old, 40 years old.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, and
humble enough to want to get better, and I was along for that ride. I was his only producer. Yeah.
But for When I Was a Sperm, which was his solo rap record that he pressed up on vinyl. Yeah. I mean, he made it happen. He did cassettes, vinyl, CDs.
You know, one thing we're not talking about is so Weldon, talk about him straddling between that music and hip hop, but remember that Weldon considered himself the founder of rap as well. So you know, as far as Weldon's concerned, he was coming back to take back what was his.
Right.
You know, he didn't see it as a new art form for him. He saw that the current day rappers were doing a new version of whatever he had been doing since the early 70s. So, you know, why shouldn't he go out there? And he definitely respected the poetry aspect. So Weldon would have said that he was a poet before anything, right? So it was the perfect place to be with New Eurekan's Poet Cafe, where there was the so-called jazz band with hip hoppers and poets, and again, also it was survival. So like G-Clef was talking about, producers kind of being phased in, and composers kind of a little bit being phased out as far as the recording contracts. It's like, what am I going to do? You know, I can't get a record deal, right? No one's going to have a composer, right, to be the star of RCA, right? So what am I going to do? And so one thing he did was he started writing plays. Right. He told all of his friends to go ahead and play for plays. And he found the Marcus Millers and Terry Burris and them at LaGuardia High School or School for Performing Arts, just so they can play in his play Young, Gifted, and Broke. But after that, it's like, how could I get some money? Right? How could I get money to sustain the lifestyle that I was born into? And outside of the gambling, which you saw in the film a little bit, he had to latch himself onto whatever was new, whatever was lucrative.
Yeah. And it seemed to be, sampling was also like a preservation and a reclamation. And if I hope that's a word, but, trying to preserve something that you were responsible and had a hand in creating. It was very disheartening and not surprising to constantly see and in a different decades in which he was, creating how the erasure of his hand in with going back to Young, Gifted, and Black, with which they ultimately corrected to the CTI recording for the Straight Life album, and so many different examples up through the present day, and just the constant while he was trying to correct that with getting his publishing acquired and in order. It was just hard because to constantly see how the actual credit and the actual the sweat and all the work that goes into creating wasn't being acknowledged, and not just acknowledged, but he was getting a mere pittance for what if we bring race into this, if this had been, hell, we the Vanilla Ice with Under Pressure and that sample, and David Bowie and Queen, I guess, won that battle and probably several millions of dollars. And like, it's just that just kept coming up for me, the struggle of, if you're the originator of something, you should be not only acknowledged for it, but compensated, so it was just hard to, as a creator, as all of us as creators, to constantly be confronted by that. So
word, as they say.
Yeah.
And race definitely is in that.
Yeah.
And I've definitely had discussions with people who saw the film, even down to hip hop producers who disagreed with T.S. Monk in that it was race based. I'm like, oh son, like we all knew you sampling the Beatles specifically, they or Gilbert and Sullivan, you know what I'm saying? Like don't do that to yourself. It's always let's find some old dusty black guy on the cover. He don't know nothing. Exactly. You know what I'm saying? You're looking for someone who don't know anything. So we knew that if it was a David Bowie, you're gonna have to pay for that. If it's One Leg Willie, from Milwaukee, you're gonna try to get that off. Right. And that's what it is. I mean, even look at the Dear Summer sample with Morning Sunrise. Someone tried to get that off. I don't know who it was, but
that's something important. I got something important. I know we close it up.
Please, you cut me off. Please.
We need more time.
I know, right? We gotta
do a part two.
The very important thing about that, white artists versus black artists that were being sampled in terms of the rights. Remember, the main thing about Weldon Irvine that made him so visible in this world is that he could collect money. A lot of black artists sold their rights, for better or worse, for hook or by crook. Just like the old story about a friend of ours, I'm not gonna mention names, who went down to New Orleans to see the Gators with a suitcase full of cash, and said, all right, I'm buying the rights to your masters. Okay. Years later, there are people that went around and did this too for years and bought the masters outright. And then the artist would be like, wait, why is this on the radio? Again, why is it a hit record, but they don't get any money because they sold the rights?
Yeah, there's some companies that make a lot of money doing that. Yeah. Yep. A lot of obscure 45s out there that's owned by.
To bring it back in, the key is Weldon never sold his publishing. He knew the value of owning his masters,
Mhm.
A, B, publishing, and he taught everybody around him, the younger musicians, that, which is what Horace Silver taught him.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because like I would not be sitting here chatting with you had it not been for his catalog, or his hand on
Right.
that time of hip hop, which was everything for me. I mean, consumed like my
Delightful,
I
man.
would go to school, come home, and make my
So
tapes,
inspiring.
make my CDs, and like that was like my existence.
That's
Like
great.
that,
Wow.
I can't imagine what my childhood in Bedside would have been like had it not been for that really
Yeah.
fertile time in music.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
I can't believe that we have so few minutes left. Are there are there any other thoughts we can go around with the time that we have? This was so much fun and needed, by the way.
I would just like to acknowledge the people in the comment section. Ancient
Oh.
Natural Mystic, Wale, what up? Daynala, what up? Long time no see. Thank you. And Solidified Band. Oh, and Rick. So this is a brother named Rick Lecter. Hope I pronounced your name properly. He's in Canada, and he was also a student of Weldon Irvine. I don't know how that worked out, but from a long time ago, I believe the late '60s. So the seeds of Weldon Irvine, they're everywhere. Right?
Yeah.
They're everywhere.
G-Clef.
Yes.
Any final thoughts to close us out? Well, we got to keep this going offline.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna have to find you, because you're inspiring just to hear the story and hear what you're talking about. And I just saw a picture of you on Facebook with Pharoah Saunders.
Yeah.
And I have some news about that. I gotta tell you off camera.
Okay.
But something I'm working on actually with his music.
For sure. Yeah.
But Victorious is the greatest man alive. He pulled off the unbelievable task of basically becoming a surrogate father to Weldon's son and getting himself ingratiated with the whole Irvine family, to the point where all the musicians know him and they probably think he plays something. So now he's coming with some music to show them that maybe he does play something.
That's wonderful.
We don't know. He's a mysterious Gemini.
That's amazing. I mean, we could have a longer conversation.
Back to Victorious, you see, because I told him, I'm like, you remind me of my friend. You want me somebody. What goes around comes around.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm playing a little bit of music now. Thanks to Weldon.
God.
And I too like jazz. I didn't grow up listening to jazz, but not definitely jazz or Black American music. Definitely is my thing.
Are you playing something?
Yeah, I'm playing.
What are you playing?
Yeah, with a keyboard.
Dope. I remember we started taking lessons.
Yeah. So that's that, right? So what Weldon Irvine School, it lives on.
It lives on.
Yeah.
So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you all. This is a great way to close out a hectic week.
I'm sorry, Curtis. I finally had to descend into my lower form.
It's all good, bro. I mean, you were dropping knowledge, man. You need to be relaxed to do that, right? So it's all good. I just wanted to come on and close out, and thank you all for being here. If y'all want to do a part 2, that can definitely be arranged. Let me know.
Anytime.
I'll provide the tech, all that good stuff. And
I guess
what y'all were talking. Oh, I'm sorry, Victorious. Go ahead, please.
Well, I just wanted to get in that we should say that this is the day that Weldon did transition.
Yeah.
Yes.
April 9th, 2002. So I definitely want to do that. And I also want to shout out, obviously,
to Bob Shulman for reminding us of that.
Right, Bob Shulman. And also I'm shout out DMX, my mother, people also who died on this date. So it's very big, powerful, very powerful day today.
And then today is Freddie Hubbard's birthday, so it's just so weird.
Oh, wait a minute!
I didn't know that.
Is it? Wow! Oh, what sign was Freddie Hubbard?
That's ill.
He was Aries. That makes sense. Hey, Victorious, did DMX ever meet Weldon?
I probably did.
Wow.
Probably, right?
I
Yeah.
figured out.
Yeah,
Hey,
no, this
they're meeting now, right?
They're meeting now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, this
He's
just
probably,
happens
he's probably, he's probably trying to get him to record with him. All right, hey man,
On Earth, man. That was like,
I
big
mean,
deal.
now that you're here, I mean, I didn't want you to be able. Now that you're here, man, like, I got some stuff for us to do. I want to check this corporate record out.
well, like I said, if part 2 needs to happen, the audience is calling for it too. Let me know.
Hey, audience,
I mean, today is
hey, audience, if you see this movie, this documentary that we did out of love, because nobody's getting rich, just strictly out of love.
Yeah.
Please stay in tune with Victorious and the page on Facebook and the Instagram and Twitter accounts, because we will be, I promise. I just had a health crisis for the last year or two. I'm coming back, and we're going to work on as promised, a soundtrack edition of
Yes.
Weldon Irvine. And I also just spoke to Ed Jackson. You saw that. So Ed Jackson, I'm counting you in, and I'm going to get all the musicians in, everybody who worked with Weldon. I know Camille Gaynor already said she's in.
Wow.
We're going to get everybody together and record some of his music and blend it in the 2021 way, hip hop and jazz together as one music, like we were talking about.
Love it.
Nice.
perfect way to end that. It's you still have, and I just want to remind audiences for Black Docs, you still have until midnight to watch the film. So if you didn't see it yet,
great,
please go rent it right now. So you have what, 4 more hours, excuse me.
Shout out to Storm the Ghetto Mutant, Soul Kid Click. I know she's watching us.
If anybody needs to do any shout outs before we close, please do anymore. But thank you, G-Clef, thank you, Victorious, thank you, Shannon. Victorious, like I said at the opening, this is one of the films been wanting to show for a long time. I'm glad we got to show it on such a special day and week. And I just want to, especially thank you again, man, for creating this art and for all that you do for Black cinema. Thank you again, bro. I mean, it's extremely appreciated being able to show your work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, all right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, audience, for watching and being so enthusiastic. And
thank you.
We'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody. All right. Everybody have a good night. Be safe.
Peace.
DMX, rest in peace. Thanks, y'all.